Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Christmas Sunday Q&As. So let me get this hat on and get to this first question. Alright. Hey Jason, I'm a hardgainer, aka guy with low appetite. Awesome that you recognize that. I also used to believe that I eat a lot and just can't gain weight, and then I realized I really do just have a low appetite. My biggest problem is that I simply forget to eat, especially if I'm really busy or focused on something and hours pass by and I suddenly did an unintentional intermittent fasting. I just saw Alan Thrall's bulking diet sample, which gave me a pretty good idea of what to eat, but I have to eat more frequently because if I forget, then I can't eat that many calories in such a small window. Would putting every meal in a calendar on my smartphone and literally have an alarm clock for every meal be the best solution, or do you have other suggestions? All right, brother. Every time I hear someone mention Alan Thrall or something Alan Thrall says, I always kind of like it. I just seem to like the guy. I haven't seen that much of his material, but I know this is kind of a side thing, but he seems to be a pretty good dude overall. And I don't like many people who do stuff in this industry, so that's rare. Now, that being said, as far as your problem goes in getting busy and forgetting to eat, you know what? Every hard gainer I've ever met has that same problem. It's perfectly normal. What you have to do is be mindful of your eating. I've very, very recently helped a real world friend with this, real life friend who had this exact same problem you do. It's really normal, and it's really common for guys who struggle to gain weight. And yeah, it's exactly what he does. He gets busy working, forgets to take a lunch break in his job and goes 10 hours without a meal. And then he's like, holy shit, that's why I can't gain weight. So, that being said, I would recommend, particularly if you're one of those people who have that hyper focus, because that's really what it is, and it's not a bad thing. People who are hyper focused like that tend to be really good at whatever they're working on. They tend to be very detail oriented. You know, the people who are either artists or people who are doing spreadsheets or whatever, they get so involved in doing their work so perfectly that it's like everything else in their world disappears, including things like their hunger, extra noises, and they just hyper focus. And you know, I think that's a big problem with the undereater, the hard gainer, is a hyper focus issue, which I mean makes you fantastic usually at whatever it is you do. I mean, it's not a bad trait to have because it usually means you're really good at detail oriented stuff. As far as setting the alarm goes, I think that's a great idea. I think it's a fantastic idea, particularly if you know you have an issue with hyperfocus, so that you have to remember to eat. Brittany's the same way, my girlfriend, but the issue that she has, she'll of course be able to eat enough when she gets there. She'll go 8 hours and forget to eat, and then she'll eat an enormous 1,500 calorie meal, but not everyone can do that. But yeah, she'll totally forget to eat all day. She might have 300 calories for breakfast, and then 12 hours later, she gets busy in a project and her blood sugar finally gets low and she remembers to eat, and then she has 1,500 calories. But I've seen her do that as an artist personally. I've watched her do the exact same thing. Alarms help, or having someone around who remind you to eat helps. I bring her food, actually. I find that helps. If I personally bring her food, so if you got someone in your life who will help you with that, that'll help. And if not, I think the alarm is a good way for you to do that, because that's exactly what your issue is. You know, you don't want to eat a bunch of garbage and shitty food, but you want to get enough in to gain weight, and you're struggling to gain weight, and that hyper focus makes it a problem. That alarm, set that alarm to make sure that when you get 4 hours into a project, when the alarm goes off, you stop to take some time to eat something. Would definitely be a good idea. So I like the way you're thinking there, and I'm glad that you recognize your problem, and I'm glad that you have a solution that you've run by someone else, because I think your solution is totally viable. Definitely give it a try. And remember, your problem is not really that uncommon, man. A lot of people have that issue. All right, next question. Quick question about the closed grip bench press. I see a lot of people letting their elbows flare out at the bottom on the chest and go outside their wrist, and in turn losing the bar wrist elbow stack for best pushing mechanics. Does this mean you may as well just go back to a bit wider to where your elbows flare at the bottom and keep the stacked forearms? Personally, I keep them tucked and stacked. Am I missing something wrong here? Thanks, man. All right, yeah, that's a problem with the closed grip bench press. There's two problems with getting too narrow. Number one, obviously damage to your wrist, because you think about the closed grip bench press, the guys who do this and they don't clear the chest, they damage their wrist if they try to use any real weight. The closed grip bench press is a big heavy compound. You should be able to move within 5% of what you move on a wide grip bench press if you do both. Some people over time actually get stronger at the closed grip, people who do it a lot. Now, that being said, the wrist is a big concern, but the other thing with going too narrow is the elbow flare. So if you're here and you're coming to where you're barely clearing the chest, look at my elbows. Look at my elbows there. They're way out there flared. If you grip it just a little wider, look at the same bar path, right? Look at my elbows now. You can get them back to 90 degrees. Sorry, 45 degrees from the body where you want to be. That's a little more ideal. It's the issue with these guys doing it. They're still gripping it too narrow for their personal rib cage. And a lot of guys with really big rib cages, guys like me, I've got a big rib cage. It can be a problem. And it's because they're still gripping the bar too narrow and it's causing them to flare out. So the real solution there is for them to just grip it a little wider. And you know what? That's still a closed grip bench press. Anything that's inside the shoulders, even if you're at shoulder width right here, that's still a closed grip bench press. So as long as you're not past, as long as your thumb isn't past your shoulder joint or your armpit, it's still a closed grip bench press, and you get all the benefits of the closed grip bench press. Those people who are flaring still at the bottom probably need to grip it a little wider, and they're probably still pressing too high on their chest. They're probably above the nipple line, which most of you know on any sort of chest press is a good way to damage your shoulders over time. You shouldn't be benching high up on your chest, and that includes the closed grip bench press. So really the issue is most likely they're still gripping it too narrow and maybe too high up on the chest. All right, next question. Hey Jason, I am really enjoying doing these one set workouts that you started doing and thought I'd do it more frequently than 3 times a week to make optimal gains, because as far as I'm concerned, it's not an optimal volume. Is it possible to train like 5 days a week doing a one set workout? Thanks. All right, tricky question. In some circumstances, I would say yes, I could get behind that. In other circumstances, I'm going to say no. What I would recommend, if you feel like you can recover from it, and you feel like your joints and connective tissue can handle you doing a one set workout on the same exercises 4 or even 5 times a week, you're recovering fine, like you feel like you're not quite getting enough workload doing it 3 times a week, and you would really like to get a little more in, give it a try. Because you are doing only one set for each big exercise. You're probably only doing 5 exercises, 6 exercises tops on these one set workouts. And you're in and out of the gym sometimes in 30 minutes. And maybe you want a little more, and as most people do who study this stuff, that frequency trumps session volume. Individual frequency, training frequency per week, actually is more productive and a bigger factor in muscle growth than the amount of volume you do in one session. So your thoughts are, well, let me get a little more frequency in, get a little more growth. If you think you can benefit from that, give 4 days a week a try. Don't go straight to 5, give 4 a try. Run it for a few weeks, see how your recovery does. See how your connective tissue handles it. If you start feeling tendonitis or soreness in your connective tissue, again, particularly stuff like down here around the elbow, right? These insertions here, down at the knees, where the quads insert right up to the top of the patella, the kneecap. You start feeling pain or soreness in those areas, it's probably not ideal for you. You might want to cut back to the 3. But if you run it for 3 or 4 weeks that way and it's okay, probably okay. You could probably ease up to 5 if that's really what you want to do. I don't think 5 days a week training is for everyone. All right, I don't think it is, and I don't think you're going to see outside of pretty much motor pattern learning on maxes and stuff like that. I don't think you're going to see much in the way of gains from that 5th day a week. However, for motor unit learning, getting better at an exercise, maybe so. In many cases, definitely so. You really need to play it case by case. You really need to look at it and see how you're recovering to it and make sure that your connective tissue is not getting inflamed from the higher frequency. And if you can handle it, okay, and you aren't having problems, then give it a try. But you need to pay very, very close attention to those things. And if they start to hurt, deload to start, and then reassess it. All right, take a deload, and then when you get back, if they start hurting again within 2 weeks, your frequency is too high for you personally. But that's easy enough to test it out. You know, it really is easy to test. You just have to really pay attention to your connective tissue, know when to deload, and know when too much is too much. It really is straightforward. You just got to be in tune with your body. And you have to listen to the cues that your body gives you if you're going to try something like that. But for some people, it can be absolutely beneficial. I don't disagree with your logic there. So you kind of have to try it yourself and see. All right, next question. For your linear hypertrophy program, what's a good procedure for testing maxes every 12 weeks? How can I avoid fatiguing myself from underguessing my max and having to test again with a heavier weight or hitting failure by overguessing my maxes? Thanks. You don't necessarily need to test your 1 rep maxes. You can calculate them using any of the 1 rep max calculators online. They're usually close enough for our purposes. What I'm going to recommend, you could test somewhere in a 4 to 5 rep max range. When you do your test week on the program, though, you need to come in and test them back to back to back in the same order you perform them during training. All right, because usually what I find where people mess up the worst on some of these, they do stuff like overhead pressing and bench pressing, and they test them too far apart. All right, we don't care what your max is when you're fresh on the overhead press. That doesn't matter. If you're going to do overhead press after you bench press in training and you're going to run periodization based upon that, you need to know what your max overhead press is when you're fatigued from your bench press. So you need to think of it in that perspective. I would almost say test all of your maxes in one day. Come in and get all your maxes and test them in order. And that's going to get you a closer idea because you are not doing a lot of these lifts fresh in a routine. So coming in and testing them that way is not a bad idea. Or if you want to separate them out, that's okay. But let's say you're going to test your deadlift after your squat, right? You only tested a 3 or 4 rep max on your squat. Do a back offset on your squat of about 8 to 10 reps. Then you'll be as fatigued as you are during the training session, right? You're more fatigued. Then see where your deadlift is. You could do the same thing on your bench press to overhead press, all right? That will get you a lot closer. And you know what? Here's the thing. When you're running block periodization, stuff like this, like these linear programs, it's okay to underguess. It's okay to underguess because eventually you'll catch back up. So what if you underguess for an entire training cycle? So what if your max was actually 5% higher than you thought it was and you run all these percentages? Or is it like you're not going to gain? If you still progress for 12 weeks straight, I cannot talk today, guys. Week. Poor Theon. But you're still progressing. Even if you're using 5% lower load, you're still progressing week to week with the linear progression. You're still going to get bigger from it. You're still going to get stronger from it. So what? You know, and if you had to pick, because we're not always going to get these perfect, if you had to pick between going 5% too light versus 5% too heavy, I would lean in the direction of going 5% too light. I think you're going to be better off for it if push comes to shove because you're still going to progress. Not a big deal. It's not a problem. Really isn't. It isn't a big deal if you underguess a little bit. It's not as bad as if you overguess and you overguess what your max is. That's what's going to cause you more problems. All right, next question. Hey Jason, is there a reason why a person would tend to eat more during the colder seasons? Is it psychological or does your body require more calories? I seem to eat much more during the winter season. Man, good question. All right, there's several factors involved. Yes, we do try to fatten up in the wintertime. Our bodies realize it's cold outside. It wants us to eat a little more. We tend to get hungrier just intrinsically on its own due to less sunlight. However, the methods by which it probably triggers that is the fact that less sunlight equals less vitamin D. And your body knows from history and generations and generations, when there's less sunlight, there's probably less food out. You're more likely to starve. You need to get food in whenever you can, right? So I think it's the lower sunlight and lower circulating vitamin D plays a big factor there. The other factor, you're not in the sun as much. It's darker. It's colder. You're more depressed. A little easier. When you're depressed, a lot of people eat more. They get hungrier. Another factor, when it's cold outside, people tend to stay indoors more. They tend to be less physically active. When you're indoors more, sitting around more, you get bored easier. We as humans, what do we have a tendency to do when we get bored? Many people, not everybody, but a lot of us, those of us who gain fat a little too easy, people like me, I can relate to this because we eat a lot, we're hungry. We get bored, we munch, we eat more. We're just prone to eat out of boredom. So boredom eating is a big factor too because it's colder outside. Wintertime, you're not out, you're going to try to stay indoors more. You're going to get bored easier. You're going to have access to more food. You're just going to tend to munch more. It's just the nature of things. So that's what's going on. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative. And I will talk to you guys next time in part 3.